It's hard to know what to make of this war. It's hard to know. It's one of those issues where I don't know what side to take yet. Because
Definitely Russia.
yeah, I think so too. I think I'm on the Russian side. But it's crazy that the conservatives are anti-war and the liberals are pro fighting for Ukraine and sending them materials. I saw a tweet by a guy that stuck out to me. I don't know if I agree with it fully, but it was the same people who were obsessed with masking everyone and shutting down the world over a respiratory illness are the same people now who are rolling the dice on nuclear apocalypse.
Right.
Like they don't give a fuck about the threat of nuclear war, but if people in their 80s and obese people were at risk of dying if they were swapping spit with somebody infected, then that's unacceptable.
But it's hard to figure out like where the motivation of everybody on the right to like basically proclaim that America's all fucked up for what's going on really comes from. And I think a lot of it is just that they don't, like during the Trump years, that so many of these Republicans basically just got used to like covering for Russia because there's this whole Russian investigation with Trump and everything. It's like they sort of like inherited whatever kind of leverage Russia has over Trump that kept him from like doing almost anything aggressive towards them or having any sort of confrontation with Putin. That somehow has like migrated down to all of Trump's fans that they are now Russia fans, and it's kind of a bizarre situation. And but the calculation all comes down to like, do you think that Putin will actually go ahead and drop a tactical nuke? Because what I've heard from a lot of experts is basically that he would be completely rejected by China and India and all these different economies that rely on him, and the Russian economy would be so much more isolated that it's. Once he drops a single tactical nuke, you can kind of like assume that his reign is over because it's either everything in Russia gets blown up or I don't know, something like that. That's the calculation that so many people on the left seem comfortable with is basically that we should just provoke Putin and sort of starve him out until he has no choice but to start to use nukes. And then people on the right are basically saying, no, we don't want people to use nukes at all. So we should just kind of let Russia do whatever the fuck they want.
Yeah, it's tough.
It's a tough choice.
And then the people on the left, they say that if you just let Russia do whatever the fuck it wants, then it's going to be, speaking of Adolf Hitler, it's going to be the same appeasement policy that led to World War II. You let Hitler take the Sudetenlands, then he's going to roll into Poland. And then you got a little conflict on your hands. And we don't want to be Neville Chamberlain. You know Neville Chamberlain?
No, I know Wilt Chamberlain.
He's the better of the two Chamberlains,
Really?
I think.
I know Emma Chamberlain.
What's that?
You know Emma Chamberlain? Oh, we got to get you tapped in with the new wave, bro.
Let's get on to... We got to debate the three Chamberlains right now. So, Neville...
Tell me who this one is. Yeah.
Neville Chamberlain. First of all, Neville is... Sydney, would you have sex with a man named Neville? It conjures up the image of phlegm running not out of
if
your
you answer
throat,
that
but
question
your nose.
wrong, you lose your job.
Absolutely. I'm in power today. Columbus wanted 1/10 of the gold flown out of the New World. I want say in summary firings around the no-jumper offices.
And it should be entirely based on who you would or would not hypothetically sleep with.
Sure.
Yes.
But it's going to start with Bossa Nova because his name is weird.
Okay.
It's going to start with Bossa Nova.
He deserves more bullying. That's true.
He does.
Yeah.
I say you and I saw those dumpsters. They're lovely dumpsters out behind the building.
Oh, make Bossa Nova hang out in one for a day?
Make him take a little
Do
time
all your
out.
work in here?
A little time out. Get his attitude right. Until he learns how to roll a proper fucking spliff.
Until he gets a haircut.
Until he gets a fucking haircut.
Who is Neville?
Neville Chamberlain was the British Prime Minister before Winston Churchill.
Okay.
And it's very strange. They all talk like some combination of Prince Charles and like Foghorn Leghorn back then. Like Neville Chamberlain gets off a plane, or I don't even know if they had, I guess they had planes back then. He gets, I'm going into a historical retelling, and I wasn't even sure if aircraft had been invented yet. That was a problem.
This is important.
Neville gets off a vehicle of some sort and goes, I have just secured the peace of our time. And now I'm making him sound like he's fucking Armenian, coming back to the Armenians. But he sounded almost indecipherable. If we could pull up an audio clip maybe at some point, that would be nice. He said after going and meeting with Hitler, after Hitler had just taken, I believe, the Sudetenlands, which were old German territories, Neville Chamberlain was like, all right, dude, yeah, you can have those. But, hey, no more funny stuff after we give you these. And Hitler was like, nine, no more funny, Stacy. And Neville was all psyched. And he goes and declares this. And then, like, the next day.
We need a side-by-side of the Danny Mullen and the AD Hitler impersonation, since they both seem like they're going to be a pretty consistent presence.
Yeah, that'd be has he been doing a lot
AD doesn't even say words. He just goes, nine, dong, ding, 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 ding.
That's almost like a mockery of a Chinese person. Like that, ding, dang, dong, dang, dong.
I feel like we all kind of feel like free license to make fun of Hitler, which is kind of why he comes up so much.
It's awesome. And just like, okay, so I was looking up Columbus, the Chamberlain comparison. Wilt is clearly the greatest Chamberlain, all right? He's awesome. He's amazing. But when I was
How
looking
many championships did he win? A
He-
lot.
I think he won 20,000 of the championships that count.
Right, because it's crazy that his fucking accomplishments were so profound that people forget about the fact that he was even a basketball player.
I could take or leave him as a basketball player and as a coxman, Adam. I know you find that hard to believe, that I wouldn't respect him for his coxmanship. I learned to love that guy when I heard him on the Howard Stern show. And he is just as comfortable around a microphone as he is a basketball or a pussy.
Oh, really? I haven't really watched him on camera too much.
Badass
How many?
podcaster.
2 championships.
Badass
Pretty solid.
radio guy.
Pretty solid.
2 championships, 2 rings, so he's like the Peyton Manning level of playing basketball.
Right.
But he is the Tom Brady of fucking white chicks.
Let me ask you something. If you don't see any play time, if you're like on the Lakers, but you like never play, you're like that guy was kind of like a backup. You see almost no floor time. You still won the championship, right?
Yeah, backup quarterback.
Is that kind of like embarrassing to like flex that? I mean, you were there. You were in the practice. That's pretty significant, right?
Yeah. You got to, like Jimmy Garoppolo, the quarterback of the San Francisco 49ers. Isn't he technically a Super Bowl winner? Yeah, Carson Wentz. We'll get out of the football. But what you were talking about earlier, Adam, that you can say whatever you want about Hitler, it's absolutely true. And that sentiment, I learned, is also true about any white guy who did anything that's now being questioned. Christopher Columbus, I was scrolling through the Wikipedia article today in preparation for this, and there are now, not only are people debating whether or not he's a good guy, that's obvious. He sent a ton of indigenous slaves back to Europe. He cut people's hands off in Cuba if they weren't bringing him enough gold.
He
things
took
like that.
Native Americans and sent them to Europe where they would be slaves there?
Most of them died on the voyage across the ocean. Him and his squad.
I didn't know that.
There was this place, Hispaniola, which was like his little governmental helm he set up. It was his Las Vegas. Like, he sailed there, cut off a bunch of people's hands, stole a bunch of gold, raped a bunch of women. A fucking prefect from Portugal sails over. It's like, oh, I don't like this one bit. Sails back to Portugal and tells the king. And the king's like, come home, Columbus. Your deeds are evil. Columbus goes home, buys a secondhand friar's robe to look more pious, and goes and throws himself at the feet of the king like, oh, I'm so sorry. I did not mean to enslave and rape the women. And then the king's like, okay, Columbus, I'll give you one more chance. Columbus goes back to Hispaniola and just immediately commences the rape.
Wow.
Just he cannot stop going to Hispaniola and fucking and killing people.
But you
And
know
has
that
to go-
he was raping. That was like, he was doing the raping. It wasn't like his underlings were raping. Like, you know that he himself was a rapist?
Yeah, I think so. Like his top generals were raping chicks, and I guess this is one of the big knocks against him is he's just an incompetent governor. So it was anarchy in his colony.
When you read about history, you hear a lot about this kind of thing of like dudes who are at war, like killing and raping. And it's kind of hard for you to imagine that like someone is in the middle of a battle and that they're thinking about getting their rocks off non-consensually with like a fucking 50-year-old mom that they just came across in a village. Like, it just seems to me that if I was in that environment, that sex in general would be the last thing on my mind. I'm picturing my dick shriveled up inside my body as I'm committing atrocities, taking people's lives. Like, I would just think that the sex thing, and maybe like rape is more about, you know, causing harm and whatnot, and not so much about sex, but it just seems like the least accommodating place to be thinking about when you're going to come next.
It's true.
But you hear about this constantly in history. Like, they're killing and raping and maiming the people.
The soldiers, they're a little better hygienically than you are right now after your trip to Dallas, but not much.
Yeah.
Blood and guts caked everywhere. Just rubble. Cities reduced to rubble. And what's the first thing the Russians did once they took Berlin from the Nazis? raped fucking everybody. There are a lot of armies would rape dudes.
We could fact check that. They were raping people like as they defeated the Nazis. It's not like, oh, we're on the side of good. It's like, no, we're gonna rape the Nazi women.
Dude, that is one of the most well documented instances of mass rape in history. Is when the Russians retook Berlin. It was fucking gnarly.
Do you think it's part of the Russian soul to rape?
That is a statement I am in no way agreeing with. I think it was more about this. I think it was, right now, Adam, you're right. I think we could say that, and I don't even think YouTube would copyright strike us because.
What's the copyright?
Does copyright?
You mean like
guidelines? Strike.
Yeah.
Actually, I think Keemstar already said that the soul of a Russian man is consumed with rape, so that's why it'd be a copyright.
Well, there is
strike.
a constant battle over what is the true Russian soul. Like what? With America, it's like we kind of feel like we have a decent understanding of like what it is to be American, whether you think that's a good thing or a bad thing. But you should read about the battle for the Russian soul.
Yeah.
But I think we may have sort of solved the whole thing for them right there. Is that they're a nation of rapists.
That is the purpose. Like we had Manifest Destiny, which was spread across the West.
Right.
They have Manifest Rapisty. And
raping destiny.
Yeah, rape destiny. But the reason they did that, I actually have a little bit of insight into this. The reason the Russians were so angry and so in a mood just to rape and destroy and shame anybody of German heritage is because when the Germans came into Russia, Operation Barbarossa, see, the Russians and the Soviets had a non-aggression pact. The Russians were not expecting an attack from the Germans. They were not allies, but they were non-combatants. And then all of a sudden, Hitler points east and goes, Russia! We need AD in here. I'm done doing.
You got to do it.
I'm done doing Hitler. But when they sent the troops over there, they were enacting a policy of scorched earth. They would go into these Russian villages, and it was really a tactical error because if they had just taken prisoners and moved straight to Moscow and captured the place,
and not wasted time raping,
they would have probably defeated the Soviets. But instead, they fucked anything that moved in these villages. They burned all the crops. They killed everybody. And all this did was just enrage and motivate the Russian populace to the point where you could hand a woman a rifle. You could hand a child a hand grenade and just point in the vague direction of the front line, and the mother and child would just sprint off and go kill Nazis.
Do you think that if you were a Russian at that time, that you would have it in your heart to say to all these fucking murderous Russian rapists to say, hey, man, hands off the Nazi lady? Because, yes, she was part of a very murderous regime, much like our own, but not cool, dude.
Yeah,
her body, her choice. Do you think you would have it in you to say that?
Her body, her choice.
I don't even know that you would have it in you to say that in America in present times.
You think I wouldn't interfere if there was a rape to take place, say, on Fairfax Boulevard?
I think we could walk out the door and there would be a gang rape taking place and you just walk to your car.
Hopefully, if it's Bossa Nova at the receiving end of it, I don't really have much of a problem. But it's an interesting question. Like, you would think of yourself, if I was living in the South in 1850, would I say something about slavery or would I be complicit in the whole thing? But I don't know. If I was in Berlin in 1945, I think I would have pretty big problems either way. And hopefully I would do what I could to help any in trouble ladies.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's always that question of like, what were all the Germans murderous Nazi monsters, or were they simply people that kind of got wrapped up in this awful ideology that one person sort of initiated from the top on down? Because I would say the answer is almost certainly no. They are not terrible people. They were just sort of captured by this bad ideology, and then a large percentage of them felt like I think it's comparatively pretty easy to trick people into thinking that they're doing the right thing if you sort of like veil it under like, well, this is how things are, and it's over the course of like decades of building up to this.
Think about it, dude. That is the 20th century is, for my money, it's the most barbaric display of humanity we've ever seen.
This has been a clip from my new podcast, SledgeLords with Danny Mullen. We're dropping a new episode every week, so either hit the link in the description or search up the Adam 22 channel on YouTube. Appreciate you guys.